Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, Sam and I wanted to do I'm going to say quick, but I don't think it's going to be a very quick video because we can't seem to keep these under 15 minutes. But we wanted to do, I'll say it again, a quick video on our sleepers. I know we already produced a little video of a sleeper specifically for like some running backs and wide receivers, but we wanted to give you a little bit of a range of like what could be a full team sleeper pick. I like what we put together. Each of us each have our own teams. Surprisingly, we did them individually and we didn't clash at all, which is probably a good thing. We really think that these players, when it comes down to it, could bring a lot of extra oomph, if you will, to your team when it comes down to it. When you need some streaming options during the bye weeks, and who knows, someone might end up taking over for a starter when the time comes, or perform better than their ADP. So what we did is we really looked for some late round picks. We're not all over round 10, but people that are between round 10 to 20 that could perform substantially better than their current ADP. And it's actually kind of surprising as I was going through my list how many people are just kind of being overlooked based off of past performance. And they're just not giving credit where credit is due. It's actually kind of really prevalent, which is really funny to me. So, with that said, let's jump in here, Sam. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so the QB I'm taking as my first sleeper. I've talked about him a few times now already, and I've drafted him probably way more than I should have at this point. But I'm taking Jaden Daniels. He is the QB 12 right now on ESPN ADP. He's going around 123, so around 11 or 12, depending on like your league size there. Um, and really, my comp for him is Anthony Richardson, who's going as QB5. He's going in around the 50th range here, and I just don't get why there's such a drastic difference between the two. I know Richardson had 4 games last year where he played well, but he got hurt. He was a good rusher. He was okay at passing the ball really. But if I look at kind of some of the college stats between Richardson and Daniels. Daniels is just a much better overall prospect. And I'm just looking at some stats here because I think it's important to kind of throw this out there. In terms of both their senior years in college, when I look at passing stats, Jaden Daniels' final year, he had a 72.2% completion rate. He threw for over 3,800 yards. He threw for 40 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. Meanwhile, Anthony Richardson had a 53% completion rate, only threw for 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. I know LSU is a better team than Florida.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously part of that plays into this. But what I found really interesting is the rushing side, because we know rushing QBs are cheat codes in fantasy football. And this will
Mm-hmm.
be my longest segment, I promise. Our rushing they're cheat codes in fantasy football. And when I look at them as rushers, Richardson's bigger. He looks more like a running back. But his final year at Florida, he rushed for about 650 yards and 9 touchdowns versus Jaden Daniels rushed for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. And Jaden Daniels' average rushing was about 2 yards more than Richardson, too. So my point of all that being, if you're drafting Richardson that early, I'd rather just wait, kind of load up on wide receivers and running backs, maybe even an elite tight end or something in that range, and take Daniels further down the line there. So that's my long-winded way of saying I really like Jaden Daniels this year.
Yeah, that was a lot. I said we were going to keep it short, Sam. Um,
My others will be, I promise.
my quarterback that I have right now is Will Levis. Right now, he's going around round 17. His consensus ADP is around 164, which actually kind of surprised me. I'll give a few quick blurbs that'll be much faster than what we just had to deal with there. Last year, between weeks 8 to 15, when he started, he was a solid QB 15. So with super flex plays, he's obviously going to be really beneficial, but I would expect him to take a step up. Last year, his receivers were not so great when it comes down to it. Not to mention, at the same time, they're a very, very run heavy offense led by Henry at that time. They have a new coach. After Vrabel was let go, we got Brian Callahan, the former OC of the Bengals. We know he likes to pass the ball. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Will Levis is Joe Burrow because he's not even close to Joe Burrow, but he's going to throw the ball a lot more. All right. And The other upside that you have here with Will is he can also run a bit. It gets overlooked, but he will give you some rushing yards. I expect him with his big frame. I think he weighs about 230 pounds from what I saw. He'll get some goal line touchdowns on the rushing side of things. So it's just overall a much better situation for him this year than it was for him last year, those last 8 weeks. So I suspect we will definitely see an uptick. And if you are someone like me in a redraft league, especially who usually doesn't take a quarterback until very late, because most QBs you're guaranteed around 15. Will Levis is a nice upside pick to pick really, really late so you can stack some other positions with some more potential. So just keep an eye out for him if you're looking for a quarterback. They can actually probably place you pretty decently and probably will perform higher than their ADP. Definitely look for Will Levis.
Well, what you left out there was that he puts mayonnaise in his coffee. So I'm completely out on Will Levis because of that alone, and has nothing to do with football. But
I don't drink coffee, but to each their own. Some people put
sure,
butter in their coffee.
well, I think we're getting sidetracked. It's weird, Kyle. Yeah. So my next pick here, I'll keep this a lot shorter than my first one. My first RB off the board, I'm taking James Conner. He's currently RB 23. His ADP is about 84 right now, so around 7 or 8. I think this is the highest ADP player that I put on my kind of roster pick here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he's really getting passed over right now. Last year, once Kyler Murray came back, once the Cardinals started to kind of pick up their performance a bit, the last 5 weeks of the season, James Conner was averaging 23.89 points a game in PPR formats there. He just like absolutely was on fire in the season. He probably won some of your fantasy championships, honestly. And this year, I don't think it's going to be much different. Murray's fully healthy. They drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think he's going to see a bunch of stacked boxes against him this year just because they can't afford to anymore. Um, and I don't think Trey Benson is coming in to replace him right away. I think
Mm-hmm.
Benson's a pretty raw prospect and is going to need a little bit of time. So I don't necessarily think he'll do 23 points a game this year, but I think he's very solid in that seventh or eighth round there.
Okay. Yeah, I like him. I think he's got obviously got potential. He hasn't performed poorly at all when he's playing. It's really just the injuries you got to watch out for. Which leads me to my next pick. Speaking of injuries, not that this guy is injury prone, and that's Ty Chandler. Right now he's going about RB 61 in like round 13, 14. That's surprisingly late considering he had a pretty good time last year when he took over for Alexander Madison after Madison just crapped the bed and was absolutely terrible. I was so disappointed because I had him on my team, and I'm like, sweet, he's going to be starting now because he was a great backup. Not a great starter. But I can tell you, Ty Chandler, he averaged 4.6 yards per carry last year, which was really, really solid on a very, very small, decent sample size of about 102 carries. He also brought in about 25 catches, which is also pretty decent. And then there's just the upside of the handcuff to Aaron Jones. I like Aaron Jones. I have him on one of my teams, and if he's healthy, I think he's going to be wonderful this year. But he is definitely injury prone at this stage in his career. He's not getting any younger. So having the handcuff Ty Chandler on your team, should he go down, and he'll get some carries anyway, he's going to be a very good handcuff to have. You definitely want to eye like some of those older backs that are on the field now that are injury prone in their careers to take their handcuffs in those late rounds because there's a good chance they're going to miss some games.
Yeah. No, and my next pick too is kind of similar to that. He's being drafted like he's a handcuff and like a backup running back right now, but I think that's a mistake. I have Chase Brown as he's the RB 41 in ESPN right now, ADP 138, so 13th, 14th round here. And the word out of Bengals minicamp right now is that Brown is getting more first team snaps than Zach Moss. I know Zach Moss had a very good year in Indianapolis last year. He kind of kept Jonathan Taylor on the sidelines maybe a bit longer than he would have been. But I just don't think Zach. Every year we see some sort of like kind of random handcuff running back really explode. Like we've seen a Chase Edmond year, we've seen
Mm-hmm.
Zach Moss. I don't necessarily think he's going to continue the same kind of pace that he did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Chase Brown's super explosive. He's a good receiving back. When he was in college, the only college running back who outproduced him in terms of production and efficiency was Bijan Robinson. So
Mm-hmm.
different situation, different school, but I think he can be really good. I think he's going to win that Cincinnati starting running back role, and I just want a piece of that offense. And if he's a starting running back, I think he's going to be worth way more than where he's currently drafted.
Yeah, it's another pick that could have really, really good upside. It all depends on really how Moss pans out, but either way, he'll definitely get his share of carries. My next running back is much deeper than I think anyone we have on our list, and this guy's going around round 18 right now, and that's Audric Estime. Obviously, he's a rookie. We don't really have a sample size outside of his collegiate career to really go off of here, so I'm not going to sit here and jump into details. But I know the Broncos' backfield is a mess. It's been a mess for the last few years. However, they tend to perform when it comes down to it. The issue is like knowing Javonte Williams can't stay healthy. McLaughlin is another possible ringer who could eventually steal some carries, but Estime is just a bull. And I suspect he will definitely get more playing time than we expect this year as he'll gradually move up that depth chart. So grabbing the rookie Estime and putting him on your bench for the beginning of the year because it's a late round pick and you really don't have anything to lose. I think he's one of those picks that could end up really being a nice payoff, especially if one of the running backs in Denver go down. Because Peyton definitely gets his running backs to work well. You can see his history when he was with the Saints, and now you can see it happening in Denver too with what he's had to work with. So definitely look at Estime in the late round if you have opening on your bench.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love Estime in dynasty formats,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you think of Peyton offenses. You think of Kamara and Ingram, and if he could eventually push out, Williams and get that Ingram role, that's obviously super valuable to have there.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great pick. Um, my next guy, I'm going to wide receiver now. So my wide receiver one sleeper is Malik Neighbors. Obviously, he's not that much of a sleeper. People know who he is, but I'm basing this off of where he's going in redraft in ESPN right now, where he's going as wide receiver 25. He's going behind guys like Zay Flowers, behind DJ Moore, behind Cooper Cup, and his ADP is 65. So he's going in that sixth, seventh round range, and
Mm-hmm.
I just think he might come in and really set the league on fire.
Yeah.
I know that he has Daniel Jones throwing to him, uh, but the Giants have to throw to somebody, and they just have not had that wide receiver that was a consistent target anywhere kind of across the field.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy's he's just a ball. He's different. Brian Thomas and him were both at LSU last year. They have similar builds, similar profiles. Neighbors, it's got to be a mental thing. I don't even think it's physical at this point. But he is just going to be one of those wide receivers that I think when we were drafting next year, I wouldn't be shocked if he's in that top 10, top 15 conversation.
No, you're not wrong. And there's also the side thing that like the top 10 wide receivers have not been the same like at all in the last 10 years. There's always people moving in and out, and someone drafted beyond the first and second round moves into it. So Neighbors definitely has that potential. I just leery with Daniel Jones. He's just not good. He's way overpaid. All right, to get to my wide receiver, I have Jalen Polk, another rookie, obviously, but this one, unlike Neighbors, is going around round 14 right now. And I would say the biggest thing you can see here is he's looking like he's going to be wide receiver one in New England. And we don't know who the quarterback's going to be right now. I think they're going to end up going with the rookie. I think May's going to end up being the QB when it comes down to it. But they don't have the quarterback decided. But either way, someone's got to be catching balls. And I know some people are leaning towards Demario Douglas when it comes down to it. But he's going to be in the slot, I believe. And I think Polk is just going to eat as the wide receiver one because he's going to be the only person that they have to throw to. So I am high on Polk. I think he's going to be really, really good grab for those of you that wait for a potential breakout candidate that you can get in the late rounds. And anytime you can get a wide receiver one late, I recommend you go after it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And we've seen Jacoby Brissett help wide receivers stay fantasy relevant. He's not necessarily,
He's a
lighting
fixture.
the league on fire, but he can support fantasy relevant players. That's
Hmm.
something he's proven in several different places throughout his career. And my next pick here, again, commonly known name, but you can get him around the ninth, 10th round. And I'm going with Jaden Reed. He's currently the wide receiver 36. And I think the reason he's not going higher right now is there's just a lot of uncertainty around the Packers wide receiver room,
Yeah.
kind of similar to the Texan situation. But I think in both scenarios, if you have someone in that wide receiver room that you believe in and you want to take your shot, and they turn out to be that wide receiver one in that room, they're going to be worth way more than where they're going.
Hmm.
So it's a bit of a bet. I don't think you're losing that much value taking them in the 10th round. But I just think Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, I think they kind of compete more against themselves, where Jaden Reed is a little bit of a different type of wide receiver. He can play in the slot. He could, play on the outside. He's more of that volume guy. So I expect him to be the guy that commands the most targets out of that whole wide receiver room. I think Jordan Love can stay hot. Like I think we really saw him consistently perform well at the back half of last season.
Yep.
Um, if there's a wide receiver one in that room, I think it's Jaden Reed, and I definitely want a piece of that Packers offense.
Okay. I like Jaden Reed. I have him on my one dynasty team, so I am all for him. I think he's going to have a monster year when it comes down to it. It's crazy when you see what he did last year with the situation he was in and how he performed, how much people are fading him going into 2024.
Yeah,
Um,
and every year, that's just to touch on that for a second too, because if you look at rookies who perform well, taking
mhm.
bets on that group of rookies like Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed, whoever it might be, to take that next step the second year, that's typically where you see the most value. So that's a
Hmm.
part of why I think you got to take some of those guys.
Yeah, and people are still fading them. Like it's usually shows it's a good inclination that success is going to happen in their career. My next one is another late round, but probably going to be wide receiver one because he just kind of fell into it, and that's Josh Palmer on the Chargers. Who else are they going to throw to? Quentin Johnston.
Lad,
What?
Lad McConkey.
Well, yes, but he's not going to be number one out of the gate. No chance. And Quentin Johnston has shown to be absolute garbage as well. He was, yeah, oh my God, he was so bad last year. But Josh Palmer had good games last year. He was really gearing up before he ended up missing a few games late in the season. But he's just a good late round grab with a really, really, really good quarterback. That's something I want to emphasize here. The biggest difference between Jalen Polk and Josh Palmer here is obviously Palmer's a few more years in the season, but he's got Justin Herbert. Whereas Jalen Polk has, like you said, Jacoby Brissett or Drake May. Who are you going to take? You're going to take Herbert. When you have a QB1 and a potential wide receiver one sitting in round 11, that's when you definitely should be scooping someone up because they're probably being overlooked. And Josh Palmer is one of those guys that I think could be performing well above where their ADP currently is.
Yeah. No, I think even if Lad is a wide receiver one, which is my bet for the Chargers,
Happen.
he's still great value there.
Mm-hmm.
We could disagree. I think Palmer is a very mediocre wide receiver, but the situation, like you said, is probably too good to pass up on him in that range there.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think we're at the tight end position now.
Yep.
So we wanted to take some deeper shots here. The first 10 tight ends in fantasy are basically the same in every single draft.
Yeah.
Maybe you flip like McBride and Dalton Kincaid with who goes first, but you wanted to take some deeper shots here. So my guy that I picked was Noah Fant. He's currently the tight end 19. His ADP is 169. So honestly, in some leagues, he might even be available on the waivers after your draft. Um, there is nothing from last year that makes him stand out in terms of why you should pick him. You have to go back to his days in Denver, where he was super athletic. He was used in the receiving game. He's faster than some wide receivers, honestly, on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he went to Seattle in that Russell Wilson trade. Um, he competed a lot with like Colby Parkinson, who's now on the Rams. he just wasn't used that much. For some reason, they seem to just not like use the tight ends that much in the passing game in Seattle there. I think though with the new coach, the new OC, I think there's a good chance for that to change. Fant's still really young. Like I don't know if Geno Smith's the best QB in the world, but for basically being a free draft pick and for tight ends being so weak after, this first couple of guys go off the board, I'll take him as like a late round bench stash. And if he can get back to being used as like that underneath weapon all the time, like he could be a steal, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he was a solid streaming tight end play when he was with the Broncos. I had him on my team in the past too, and he's an okay tight end. But he's never been a focal point of any offense he's ever been on. So seeing that transition, if the Seahawks can get him the ball, I think he could definitely pay off in those later rounds. Which leads me to mine. Honestly, I am surprised that mine is going where he's going, but I guess he just isn't in the top 10, and that's Pat Freiermuth over on the Steelers. He's going around 13th round right now, so if you need a streaming tight end, because most likely if you're taking a tight end at that point, you probably already got your starting tight end, that he could definitely get in there and benefit. So last year he was hurt. He missed a few games and still had a pretty solid season when it came down to it. And he's in a much, much better QB situation this year compared to last year. Now, you might sit here and look at me and go, what, is Russell Wilson or Justin Fields? It doesn't matter. Both of them are better than Kenny Pickett. It's not hard to be better than Kenny Pickett, who I'm super excited to have as our backup quarterback in Philly. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's going to have a solid year. I think he's going to definitely perform better than what his ADP is right now, which is the thing I keep reiterating here. You want to look at value in these rounds 10 to 20. If you get someone in the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and they perform like a 9th round draft pick, you won that pick. That's really the goal, what you want to look at when you're drafting for your team. Just look at where you are and what you can get and make the right move. A lot of people, I think, get caught up in the minutia of like, oh, I need to fill my wide receiver. No, you need to take the best player. All right, that's people break their mentality when it comes down to it because they just need to fill things out, and that's really just not the case. You want to take who's available and who's going to potentially be better than where you're taking them. Value is immense. So Pat Freiermuth, I think, is definitely one that can serve that purpose. I know I grabbed him late in my new Dynasty League that I'm just starting. So definitely keep an eye out for people like him in these later rounds. Can't hear you. There you go. This is perfect.
Connected to my phone randomly, so sorry about that. Yeah, so
Right.
I know you just finished up about Pat Freiermuth, but no, yeah, I think he's a good pick. Obviously, Arthur Smith, when he was at the Falcons, did not use Kyle Pitts like most of us wanted him to.
No.
But 33 or like 36% of all targets went to tight ends there. So yeah, I think Freiermuth could be in for a big year.
Yeah, we just had John Smith in the way.
Yeah, no, well, Jonnu Smith, could have been a sleeper pick too, down in Miami, but we'll see. Yeah, and so our last picks here, we did our one flex spot, and for my final pick, I'm going with Josh Downs. He's wide receiver 72 right now. He's drafted, again, kind of that 169, 170 range, so last round, pick up off the waivers type of deal for a lot of different redraft formats here. And I think the reason he slipped here is because of Adonai Mitchell being drafted in the second round by the Colts. But I just don't think that's competition for Downs as much as it might be eating into the Pittman target share. I just think they're different roles. I'm not necessarily a big believer in Mitchell either. I think that Downs is going to be that slot guy. He could be used on the outside as well in different roles. We saw that when he was at North Carolina. I just think he could be that kind of safety blanket over the middle of the field for Anthony Richardson. And if you can draft him at the very end of your picks and he turns out to be that wide receiver too with high volume upside, I think that's a steal there.
Sure. I give it that. There's definitely potential for Josh Downs. Picking that back to one ground, by the way. I can hear
I'm
myself.
echoing. Yeah. 1 second. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Do you want me to redo that and we'll just edit out the part where my...
Hearing your part was fine. It was obviously that audio was a little off because of the echo, but it was when I started talking that we had a problem.
Yeah, I got a Slack and then it reconnected to my other laptop. We could edit this part out.
We?
You. Well, yeah, happy to help.
No, that's fine. I'll pause here and then I'll jump into what I said in response.
Okay.
All right, yeah, I like Josh Downs. I do think that there's a potential upside in him in the late rounds, so he's definitely worth a stash when it comes down to it. Obviously, if there's an injury or something, he's going to perform a lot better too. That's one thing you definitely got to take into consideration when you are judging who you're taking to. Is just injuries are super important. All right, let's jump into the last one that we have, and this is my flex pick. This is my pick, and I think it's a really good one. If he's healthy, it's just going to be a really good year, and that's J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins has had a brutal career so far since he was drafted. The guy cannot stay healthy. Now he's in the backfield on the Chargers, and the backfield of the Chargers is a bit of a mess itself. I do not think he needs to worry about anything if he's healthy. I think he's going to be the go guy when it comes down to it. I think, who's the other running back there? Gus Edwards, off the top of my head. I think he's on the Chargers.
Yeah, Gus Edwards, come on.
No, he's not it. J.K. Dobbins, when he's healthy, just to give you these quick metrics, right? 2020, averaged 6 yards per carry. 6. This reminds me of like back in prime Jamal Charles years on the Chiefs, when for some reason they would not get rid of Jones, and he just got in the way of Charles, who was just running around people. And once he became the starter, he was an absolute monster. Last year, or not last year, in 2022, his yards per carry were 5.7. And then obviously there was an injury, and then the injury last year, which has dampened a large chunk of his career, which is unfortunate. He's going to be the starter if he's good to go. And I think you'd be a fool not to grab him where he's going, which is right now in the 13th round. His ADP is around 125. And I think that's a steal for an RB coming in that late that could potentially give you a return of a top 24 RB. Possibly a little bit higher than that, too. If he's healthy, I could see him being an RB1 on return, which means he'd be top 12. And he's one of those guys that you taking late could really be a league breaker and put you over the edge when it comes down to it, should the stars align when it comes to getting him out there and actually starting. So, yeah, that's my last one.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jim Harbaugh, we know, is a big fan of just loading up that line and rushing the ball. So it's the injury thing with J.K. Dobbins that has me worried. But you're right. I think whoever starts for the Chargers at running back there, none of them goes super high. J.K. Dobbins obviously at least was the most explosive in that group pre, 2 season-ending injuries.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think if he gets that job, he stays healthy, he could be an absolute steal there.
Yep. All right, I think that wraps up our sleepers for what we got for you guys. Obviously, we came to you with a lot of late round picks that you guys could potentially be grabbing late in your drafts. We hope this helps come draft time for you guys. I can tell you we are definitely picking up some of these people. I already have. I know Sam has as well. So just keep your eyes on these. If you get late round drafts and you're looking for people, definitely refer back to this, and we'll see you guys in the next video.